Alright, so you probably clicked on this video because you want to know how to score high in your exams, because you put in the same amount of effort as any other student in your class to revise for the exam, yet you're still getting below or just average scores compared to all the other students in the exam. And so you want to know how the top students are revising to allow themselves to score higher than most of the students in the class. So that's everything that I'm going to be covering in this video. I'm going to be going through all the factors that affect your revision and how the top students tackle this and what ways they use to revise for exams, and the most important technique they use to revise and memorize their content effectively towards the end of this video. So let's get straight into the video. The first important factor to take in is that smart students always start early when they know they have an exam, because effective revision cannot be rushed. If you expect yourself to score high when you're revising the night before or on the same day in your school library for the exam, then it's completely pointless to even think about scoring average, because you're cramming up all your revision in a short amount of time. You're increasing your stress because you've got so many topics to cover in such a small amount of time. So starting early is very important because it allows the student to organize when they're going to revise. It allows them to have breaks on certain days, and it makes the whole process of revision so much easier because they know they've got such a long amount of time to revise, and it gives them more days to do exam questions towards the end. So starting early is very important. Depending on how much you revise in a day, you can change the amount of days, weeks, or even possibly months for a revision for your upcoming exam. It all depends on how long you can study and how important the test is for you. So starting early is very effective, and starting early is what all the top students do for scoring high in your exam. The second thing top students always do is they always make a plan. And this includes making a revision timetable to tell you when you have to revise throughout the day, what you have to revise, and how you're going to revise. Because if you don't make a plan and you open-handedly start revising, it's not going to be effective because you've got so many topics, you don't know which topics you're good at or which you're not good at, and how you're going to revise. So a way to make a plan to help you revise is by making a retrospective timetable. Some people have talked about how to make a revision timetable, so you can check their videos out. But to put it simply, retrospective timetable is basically a timetable which consists of all the topics that you're going to face in your exam, and it color coordinates them depending on how confident you are on those topics. So if you have a topic in biology such as chromosomes and you find it more difficult than say the simple cells biology topic, then you're obviously going to make that red because you're not as confident in it. And so obviously using that timetable, you'll see that you want to spend a longer amount of time on chromosomes than you have to do for cell biology. It's so effective, and you can even go one step further and note down what times of the day you want to revise at. It's not really effective in any sort because you're just giving yourself a routine just like you have in school. But if you want to go the extra mile and you want to be more strict with yourself when it comes to revision, making a plan is so important because it allows you to be more organized, and it also decreases your stress because you know what you have to do throughout the day and what topics you have to cover throughout the day as well. Now, the third way top students always score higher in the exams is because they take breaks during their revision. Taking breaks is so important because you can't expect yourself to revise constantly. You can't expect your brain to take in so much information in a continuous amount of time. You have to take breaks because you want yourself to stay focused in any amount of time that you're giving yourself to study. You want to be able to cover content effectively. You don't want to procrastinate, and you want to have zero stress during that time. The Pomodoro technique can come in handy, and it's basically a technique in where you study for a certain amount of time, you take a break to allow yourself to refresh, and then you get back to the studying. So effective because it allows you to stay focused in the times of your studying. It allows you to look forward to the break, so it motivates you to complete the task. And so you basically set yourself a deadline that in this certain amount of time I have to complete this amount of the task, and then I'll go back to it after. This is really important for the brain to take in information when you're memorizing stuff, because it's going to be very difficult if you expect your brain to memorize so much content in hours. So put simply, studying for 8 hours constantly is not as good as studying for 1 hour, taking 5-minute breaks after those 1 hour. So taking breaks and using the Pomodoro technique is very effective. It can reduce your stress, allows you to focus more on the parts of your day when you are studying. Now, the fourth tip that so many smart students use when it comes to revision, and more specifically towards the end of their revision, is simply to use exam questions. Because most students will memorize the content, even understand the content, yet they won't score high in their exams, and it's simply because they're not used to how the questions are supposed to be answered in the exam. They expect the questions to be written in a simple way, asking them to define the process and how it works, but it can't simply be like that. Examiners will question the statement in a different way. They will trick you, they will use different situations, and in all those situations you have to use some of your common sense as well as the knowledge that you've learned. You might have to use your mathematical skills in graphs, you have to use your calculator, your equations that you've learned, you have to rearrange those formulas or those equations that you've learned, and it becomes so much easier if you do exam questions because you're used to the type of questions that will come in the exam. Of course, they won't be the exact questions for most of the time, but if you're used to the questions that might come up in the exam, you're going to be much more confident answering those questions, concluding to you scoring the highest in that exam, just like the top students do, making you a top student. So at this point, we've talked about the several factors that can help you to score high in your exam. Those were, to be honest, minorly tips, and I wanted to really make this video about this tip that I'm going to talk about now, which is how to revise effectively using a technique called active recall. Active recall is basically a revision technique in which you test yourself because you're actively recalling the information that you've learned. Active recall is so much important than any other revision techniques you've heard of. Spaced repetition and other techniques, they all come in place after using active recall. You probably don't know how to use it effectively. Taking a step back, how do you actually memorize content before you can start testing yourself on that knowledge? The way that most students should be revising or memorizing a content is by using look, cover, write, check. It's not named anything specific, but many students will be using this technique, as well as me. I also use this technique for memorizing content. Taking this into practice, let's say you've got a particular topic. Now, the first thing you want to do before even using the look, cover, write, check method is to understand the concept, because understanding that topic is half of memorizing that content, because you simply can't rely on your brain retaining that information if the brain hasn't understood it, because it will simply block the information because it just doesn't understand it. So you can understand this concept by either researching online, you could watch an educational video, you could pay attention in your lessons when they're talking about this topic, because essentially revising this topic, so you've obviously went through this before, and once you've understood it, then you can move on to the method of look, cover, write and check. So the look, cover, write, check method is basically used when you're reading the page, and as you've understood it, you'll start to figure out that some of the information is starting to stick in your brain, and that is a part of the look method. And once you've done that, you cover the page and you want to write this down. You want to either write this down or say out loud. Most preferably you want to write this down, because this information will be retained in your head for a longer amount of time if you write it down. And once you wrote it all down, everything that you know, everything that you read, you will check it at the end. If you got all the information right, that's good. You can move on to the next topic if you did the whole page at once. But if you missed out some information, then it's so important to start all over again, because you can't just say to yourself, oh, I'll remember it in the exam, I won't forget it. It's only 1 or 2 sentences. Those 2 sentences could cost a serious amount of marks in your exam, and you not going through them and just ignoring them and expecting your brain to memorize it, it won't be helpful at all. So yes, it might take a long amount of time, but going through it all again will make sure that you've memorized every single thing in detail. To conclude, these are all the tips I wanted to give you to help you revise and get the scores just like any other student would, or more specifically the top students in the class. So thank you so much for watching this video. If you haven't subscribed to my channel already, please subscribe, because I really want to get 1,000 subscribers by July in 2022. Thank you so much for watching this video. Check out all the other videos on my channel, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.